Welcome to another episode of a series of podcasts that's chatting to the artists behind the new Soundness project for the 2021 Visual Arts Centre in Scunthorpe. My name's Bradley Mell, and tonight I'm talking to Lucy Cunningham, who is in charge of the audio element of this project. Now, she's curated a piece called Paint Mixing to the Sea, and I think it's fascinating, I really do, and we're going to chat about that in detail. But Lucy, first of all, thank you for coming on, but what is it about sound in general that really interests you about working with it?
Great question, and thank you for having me. It's a lovely opportunity to share more about the work. What interests me about sound? Not knowing what might come out, community, archives, so many things. I think sound first interests me in that, for me, who I should say am able-bodied and I can hear, I can step out my door and be hit with a very monotonous tune of traffic 6 days a week. But then I could go walking on a Sunday when there's no one about and be greeted with a hush and then the song of birds in the morning, dipping in and out of earshot. And it's just that exciting feeling of this spontaneous nature of sound. And I work a lot in writing and performance. So I'm often seeking ways to present observations and moments of feeling or emotion through poetic language or movement. But with sound, which ties both writing and performance, or at least it can do, you can record and share something in its most organic form without much manipulation or distortion or kind of reworking choreography. It's a genuine archival performative tool, a narrational one as well. And you can share this among communities all over the world. It lends itself to the digital realm, and yet it can be played as a soundscape or as a music set for live audiences. It brings communities together through listening. And I just love the thought of people sat listening to a particular DJ set on the radio for an hour or a podcast, tuning in, all closing their eyes and letting the sounds wash over them. And I've met so many wonderful people through sound work. It really enables interactions with amazing collaborators and audiences, and it enables interactions that really make you listen properly to other people's spaces in a meditative way without distraction. And for me, it makes me really forge good intentions. So when I put pieces together, I want to share something that really reflects other people's experiences in as kind of kind and beautiful a way as possible for other people to enjoy. There's challenges as well. Not everyone can access sound so easily, and it's not a tangible medium like with painting. You can't see it so much, but it's transportative as well. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing I'd like to pick up there, you talk about experience and the way that we sort of perceive the world around us, really, I think is something that is quite a focus of this piece we're going to go on to chat about. Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but what you mentioned there about, been going outside and for the first 6 days of the week, you could hear one thing and then it'd be something else completely different. One of the impressions that I got listening to this was that there is a real focus on the sounds that ordinarily might be considered mundane, and it's sort of elevating that in a way, I think.
Yeah, definitely. You can kind of take these isolated sounds and then suddenly be somewhere completely different to where the walls you are right now. Yeah, you can pull them together to create this audio landscape, if you like, a soundscape, and really go across a diverse range of spaces. Yeah, working with the pieces that were submitted for the 2021 Visual Arts Centre's open call, I was able to really delve into, someone's warm kitchen, into people's kind of daydream states, singing whilst cleaning their bathroom. I was able to kind of take a trip to Lidl. It was really fun, tuning into the different kind of clicks and motions of people's routines. And I think that's what's really, for me, special about sound.
Yeah, let's look at that piece a little bit in general. With a project like this, can you ever anticipate something before you start, or did you really have to wait to see what is submitted? And from that, moving on from that, with the samples that you got given, because you only have to look at the credits at the end, there was quite a big uptake for this project, I think. A lot of sounds got sent in. Was it what you were expecting before you started?
Coming back to what you said about, can you really start a piece until you've listened through them? For me, it's a case of waiting and then sitting down and really spending time listening, because you can think you've heard something and then you return to it at a later date and you catch something that you didn't notice before. With the pieces that I received, some were expected in that I was looking for sounds that had connotations of home or homely feelings. So when I received the first few and saw that one was labelled Maud's Kitchen, it seemed very fitting. It had the cosy yet chaotic nature of home I associated with kitchens, being like the hive of the house where people and objects accumulate. But then added to the mix were exercise machines and bakery ovens. And these were like quite funny, upbeat sounds that I hadn't planned for. But that resonated with me in that these objects and places were very much part of people's kind of daily routines. And whether those were in the house or nearby, they produced quite like homely feelings, positive feelings. And then lastly, that beautiful piece of the sea and the kind of choral woman's voice. That one really took me by surprise. I don't live by the sea, but I have family who live along coastlines in Ireland who I'd visit growing up. And so I felt this like unforeseen nostalgia and melancholy, maybe, that I don't live near the water, but also this joy in thinking of people feeling the ocean as their home, and this sense of escapism and relish for like one of nature's greatest sonic sources. So yeah, very unexpected, but a really lovely eclectic mix.
When you do receive sounds like this, there are some that naturally you think they could go together. We mentioned the home there, cutlery around the kitchen, perhaps with the dishwasher, that type of thing, obvious connections. But with the ones that necessarily you weren't expecting, how do you go about pairing sounds? Because, there's a lot of overlap throughout this piece, which it's nearly, I think, 14, 15 minutes, isn't it? So we do go on a real journey. And you mentioned the sounds of the sea there. We're going to talk about atmosphere, I think, shortly. But yeah, how do you go about choosing what sounds go with which?
I'd love to say that it's purely instinctive, but honestly, I listen through all the sounds I've received, all the sounds to hand. And I work out, first of all, if there's any similar sounds or sounds that originate from the same or similar source. For example, a whirring microwave and clattering metal cutlery, as you say, they're both distinctive kitchen noises. So they sit quite perfectly together, overlapping to reflect the kind of busy, much loved kitchen. So I wanted to layer these energetic pieces together. And then later I might find that I have the sound of water. In this case, we had waves, and the expelled steam and clicks of an iron being used on an ironing board. Those are two quite different locations and actions. One's quite lulling, sound of waves getting quieter and louder as they hit the shore. The other is the more rhythmic, kind of percussive sound of the bleeps on an iron when it's ready to use. But it also has the sound of air being filled with steam. So what drew me to placing these ones one after the other was that the actions and the calming sounds of water, which is like a natural force that makes sounds as it comes into contact with something. We have a coastline that the water pours against, and that makes a shh, shh, shh noise. And then you have similarly a kind of shh noise as steam comes out of an iron. So it's these actions and feelings that make me want to pair recordings. And also when thinking about order, what sounds will open up a scene and then transport you more quickly to a place, and then which sounds will take you kind of around a place from one location to another. So it's telling a story along the way. So sound is this, transportative medium, and I try as best I can to sort of use it to map sites of emotion and action. How can I kind of carry people through a space sonically?
think that's really interesting because I do get a real sense of journey through this. I mean, at the start, you start with the microwave, and it does feel like early in the day. You know, this could be somebody going down, having breakfast, that type of thing. You know, you're stepping outside. You mentioned the supermarket, that sort of thing. You mentioned the rhythmical nature of it, and that was something I'd like to bring up because there was certain things that I picked out as well. For example, I think the bell chiming adds natural rhythm. You paired that with somebody hitting metal, that does the same sort of thing to me. But also a little bit earlier on, there is very literally a song. You know, there is the song of the radio, and there's a man singing to it. When you've got music, do you have to work with that in a different way, or does it just sort of accompany the piece?
I think it accompanies the piece, and the music in this case was part of the sound recording that I received. I think I have to think more about kind of how I convey it through captioning. But in terms of the sonic nature, I think the two go very much hand in hand. When I'm kind of doing my sound pieces in various projects and people ask, you know, what is it that differentiates soundscapes and music? I do think there is a bit too much distinction placed on the two, when in fact they are two mediums that help people escape to somewhere else or feel a sense of comfort, or maybe something that mirrors how they're feeling at the time. And, you know, it's still very rhythmic. Soundscapes can still be very rhythmic. They're collecting recordings from spaces that already have their own percussive or kind of choral qualities. I think the two essentially explore spaces through these different kind of voices. One might be kind of through a synth, which is like electronically affecting sound, and the other might be a slightly more organic clip of like birds singing, but they're still reflecting this mutuality between people and the spaces that they're in. And I really like to think of the spaces and bodies interacting as a kind of feedback loop. So they're like collecting and then exhaling each other's rhythm. And I think I treat them both similarly like that.
I think that's quite interesting in terms of how you're sort of portraying people interacting with the space. And that leads me on to atmosphere, I think, because I'd like to focus a little bit on the section in the supermarket. And just to borrow from the captions, it's the melodic beats of the supermarket, and you hear that. And then there's inaudible conversation. So you hear the voices, but you can't really make it out. And over the top of this is sort of a generator sound, which is it's quite sinister in a way, or certainly to my interpretation. And this sort of, I don't know, this journey to this supermarket, when I compare this to a later bit of the piece where there's the piano keys and the waves of the shore, which is certainly evokes to me a much calmer atmosphere, it did make that sort of mundane place of the supermarket seem almost quite sinister in a way. I don't know if that was necessarily something you were, you know, trying to convey, but just the combination of sound really created that atmosphere for me.
See, I didn't see it as so sinister, but again, this is exactly why I find it really amazing, like how sound can evoke these different responses. I think what I did convey, which you picked up on, is this sort of more kind of machine-like, quite less sort of soothing, less natural in feeling. I think what the person who recorded the initial supermarket sounds was conveying was how we do sometimes miss these like ever-present like bleeps and clicks that are in these spaces such as supermarkets that we pass through. What I then attempted to do was kind of elevate this, and like by layering more of these percussive sounds, if you like, was to give this sense of like how we are surrounded by so many interesting and at times quite sinister and scary and uncanny sonic sources. I think also maybe it's a comment on how we're moving through these spaces that we as humans have like created, but they've also taken on a life of their own.
that brings us quite nicely onto the subtitles and the captionings, because we've already talked about accessibility, that being one thing. When I was listening through it, there were certain things that I thought off the top of my head, I don't know what that is. So I was having a look at the captions and to seeing what it was. And I found that, to me, in a way, it almost didn't matter. I had pictured something, and what I'd seen that it actually wasn't necessarily what I was thinking, but it didn't, it didn't detract from my experience in any way. Tell me a little bit about the inclusion of descriptions, because that I think that's something you were quite keen for when you were asking for the submissions.
Well, for one, it's just so important for me to make sure that as many people can access the work as possible. And this is something that 2021 Visual Arts Centre does amazingly, I think, is, thinking about access, but not making it this thing that you have to labour over, just building it in quite naturally and making sure people feel welcome when they're engaging with works. But for me, audio descriptions, captions, transcripts, they're all an added insight, really. I think with the descriptions, you can really activate a space even more. So the sound does this anyway, but you're giving more attention to what it is you're listening to, what it is that that's happening. And so the objects that have been recorded, the people that might be making the noises, they've been named, and they've got these specific details given to them that people might have missed in the audio, no matter how often they've listened to it. I'm interested in this material and sonic potential within our spaces. And so, I'm trying to promote a symbiotic relationship with our surroundings, as well as enabling people to be part of these. And I guess the descriptions enhance this experience. It gives me and readers context to what people have been recording, what people are witnessing and might be feeling. And that can inspire even more understanding, more feelings. It's an attempt to make the work as kind of transparent, but also, elevating it. And I think it's making you more attentive to what's going on.
I think a good example of that is actually quite early on, again, talking about that microwave, where the description says a whirring and high-pitched beeps that could be the sound of a microwave. And I'm assuming that description is submitted by the person that submitted the sound of the microwave. But I think that word could, I think that's really interesting, because it's not necessarily saying this is definitely a microwave. There is some interpretation there.
Yeah, in that particular example, the person had written that. But there were a few moments where people either hadn't submitted a description or had given very little away. And I think in my role of providing audio descriptions, there is also a certain amount of, I guess, autonomy in what I write, but also making sure that it's doing justice to the sounds and really trying to give access as much as possible. But the could thing is really interesting, because everyone experiences things differently. And no matter how often you might listen to a particular piece, it could present itself in a new way, depending on, what you're going through, the surroundings of where you're listening to something, but also maybe you just missed a particular beat the first time. Also, there are a number of sounds in people's homes that could be mistaken for another thing, which is just really fun. And it reflects the kind of energy that's going on. But the flexibility, I think, hopefully enables people to understand the work and feel welcomed that they're experiencing things along with other people. It's a piece about home and feelings of comfort, so why not make people feel like they can enter these sonic spaces?
I feel like, in a way, you've actually almost answered my next question with what you've just said there, but I will just end with this one. What is it that you hope that people gain from or experience by listening to this piece?
I hope people feel that they've been taken on a little journey, and it feels rather intimate, and a sense of escapism, but also kind of, comfort and assurance in their own homely spaces. And maybe also it will make people stop and listen and watch things in their own home more, and not be so fast to get everywhere, but just feel a sense of calm in their personal space. and just listen and give a bit more attention and care.
That's brilliant. Lucy, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank
It's been
you
really
very
interesting.
much. It's been lovely speaking to you. Thank you.
And thank you everybody for listening to this. To hear Paint Mixing to the Sea and to check out all the other artists' work in relation to the Soundness project, go to the 2021 Visual Arts Centre website.